happy 64 Independence Nigerians and also to Nigeria as a country. It's been a long way coming with all the setbacks, all the progress, all the challenges, but then we have overcome it and we're still hopeful that Nigeria will continue to grow and be that country that we all look forward, to having a very great and a beautiful country. The program is the Dailies, it's kind of a little special for us because, it's the 1st of October and it also to be our independence. So we're really excited and happy here on the show. I am Sada Elisha Dasho. I'm doing this program together with Rachel Tansy. Happy Independence.
Happy Independence, Sele.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and happy. I don't know, despite the fact that it's kind of mixed feelings because we're seeing other people that are planning for a protest, and then for others it's more like a new month. But for us here in Nigeria, it's an independence, and then we're really, really excited and happy, despite the fact that it looks like there's nothing to celebrate concerning the country. But then when you look inwardly, Rachel, we have every reason to be excited and to be happy and to look forward to a more beautiful, a more, great country. That is just it, to just sum up the whole thing. But I'm just hopeful that this country will be great. It is already great,
It
so
is
it will continue
great.
to be
Yes.
great.
So it's just like a person. Even if you feel you haven't accomplished much, even if you feel in life you're not where you want to be, you can't help but be happy when you turn another year.
True.
I think that's the same for Nigeria. Despite knowing that we are not where we want to be, we are moving at the progress that is very slow. We can say that as Nigerians. We can sit down here and tell ourselves otherwise. But we've turned another year. We are 64. And it is a milestone. It shows that we will grow regardless of what is happening. But then eventually, I just hope that this growth, we will have something to show for it. And I believe that as we go on, we will see some of our wins and some of our losses and see the way forward as a country.
Honestly. Well, you can see our viewers. We're dressing in our wonderful color green and white. Just in a way to actually show how excited and happy we are over here. Well, on the dailies today, we have quite a number of papers. So we would love it to also drop your comment and your views regarding any of the stories. And we will go straight into the papers, starting with the leadership newspaper.
On the leadership newspaper, EFCC misses annual report deadline, arraigns Taraba ex-governor Ishaku. NAF probes Kaduna bombing, insists location was terrorist enclave. The big story on the paper, at 64th Independence, Tinubu admits economic struggles, calls for patience. Defense fiscal reform says inherited bad economy, says I inherited bad economy. Declares we will survive this one. Governors, others call for patriotism and unity. And also we have the Renewed Hope Agenda milestones, and we would like to look at it. We have 70,000 Naira national minimum wage approved. Federal government has commenced full implementation. On security, rather, we have over 3,700 terrorists killed in the last 6 months. Nigeria's most feared bandit leader are being systematically neutralized. And we have presidential initiative on CNG attracted $175 million in private investment so far. 125 conversion centers in Nigeria, up for 7 last year. And then we have Nigeria Education Loan Fund, over 46,000 student beneficiaries across 59 tertiary institutions, over 5 billion naira disbursed. We have Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation, 3.5 billion Nigeria in loan, 3.5 billion naira in loan disbursement. We also have $37.7 billion foreign exchange reserves, now at 37.7 billion, up from 35 billion in May 2023. Economic stabilization bill, where will facilitate remittances and foreign and domestic investment, will reduce tax burden, promote business and entrepreneurship. Headline inflation down for the second consecutive month. And oil and gas, three new landmark presidential directives issued to unlock billions of dollars in new investment. Now we have a net foreign exchange inflow of $25 billion in the first half of 2024, up 55% year on year. For non-oil exports, $2.7 billion from non-oil exports in the first half of 2024, up 6.26% from the first half of the year 2023. So you might want to grab the leadership and find details of these achievements on page 4, and that's all the news on the paper.
All right, still looking at other papers where we will be looking at the Guardian newspaper, starting with Nigeria at 64, which is the big story on the paper. Economic hardship, political rift overshadow celebration. Where we're seeing a picture of Nigeria at 64, we are working hard, be patient and grateful. Learn to pray and fast for the national development, where we're seeing Nigeria and then we're seeing those who are working. So it's quite an irony where we see it seems as if others are working and others are feeding from the labor of the workers. So you can do well to read what this picture is actually trying to say. The new Chief Justice of Nigeria, Apabio Mutar, set agenda for Kekere coup. You can read that on page 5. Concerning the allegation of Bobrisky, where we're seeing federal government set up a panel to probe the Nigerian Correctional Center amid denials. Tinubu highlights gains, prospects, embark on the National Youth Conference. You can find that on page 14. Fubara APP insists on local government polls as the court stops INEC from releasing voters' register. 64 years on, time to reset Nigeria for real growth. This is an editorial you can find on page 15. Concerning the independence, we're having Atiku NLC caution politicians against undercutting democracy. And concerning the October 1st protests, it's unconstitutional to confer protesters, Lagos lawyer tells the federal government. It's unconstitutional to confine protesters, Lagos lawyer tells the government. You can read that on page 3, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, the big story, protest. Police talk tough, organizers allege intimidation. The writer says nobody is harassing organizers, a statement from the federal government. IGP orders waterlight security nationwide. AIG Igwe warns against protests, says miscreant shitters want to hijack process. We won't allow protest or procession in Abuja. This is a statement from the FCT command. And then we also have a goodwill message. Nigeria at 64 with President Tinubu, our nation will rise again. Signed Senator Abdul Aziz Yari, Zamfara West. And that's all the news on Vanguard.
Let's take a look at Daily Times newspaper. Protecting Nigeria's solid mineral resources requires collaborative approach. Coming from the Chief of Defense Staff, Christopher Musa. You can see more detail of that story in the paper. Still talking about Nigeria at 64, NLC PDP Atiku bemoan the state of polity. Well, we have having some writer here. Nigerians must continue to demand accountability from their leaders. Coming from NLC, resist APC totalitarianism exploitation. PDP tells Nigerians. At 64, Nigeria lacks political inclusivity, free, fair elections, says Atiku. More data found in the paper. Tinubu swears in Justice Kekere Aku as the Chief Justice of Nigeria pledges to preserve sanity of the judiciary. 64th anniversary, IGP orders watertight security nationwide. UBA achieves 40% earnings growth to 1.37 trillion naira, declares 2 naira interim dividend. You can find detail of that on page 14. Troops eliminate 8 terrorists, rescue 40 hostages, a report coming from the army. And still talking about the 64th anniversary, Middle Belt minorities demand secession from North and others. We have a picture story where we can see some victims with their portion of relief materials provided by Borno State Governor Professor Babagana Zulum as a result of the recent flood in Maiduguri held at the Babagana High Islamic School on Monday, which happens to be yesterday. And that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, Nigeria on brink of one-party dictatorship, Atiku warns. Hold federal government responsible for another strike, as he's saying. Bauchi governor writes Tinubu demands investigation of intended pilgrim arrested for alleged banditry. We're winning war on terror and banditry, a statement from President Tinubu. Nigeria at 64, tales of frustration, despair, and distress. The older you get, the more frustrated you become. A statement from a senior citizen, and even youths can say the same. You can find details on page 32 and 35, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Defines Shaibu snubs Edo government warning, inspects project as the deputy governor of the state. You can read detail of that in the paper. On yearning, organizers insist on October 1st protest despite Northern coordinators' withdrawal. Dangote Group to transport refined products by sea eases road pressure. IPOB wants Indiable to shun Independence Day celebration, and you tend to wonder why. Read more detail of that in the paper. Alleged 528 billion naira fraud. EFCC vows to probe defense minister. Afenifere vows to mobilize against unitarianism in Nigerian politics. And still talking about 64 Independence Day celebration. IGP orders maximum security nationwide. Major highways event venues fortified against potential threats. And still talking about a 15 million naira bribery scandal, Bobrisky a no-show as drama unfolds with the very dark man Adeyeju at Reps hearing. And if you saw the picture, it actually raised a number of concerns from Nigeria the way he actually dressed to the House of Reps yesterday. Rivers local government election must hold October 5th, which happens to be on Saturday. Fubara declares amid court order, so you can read more detail of that. We have a picture story where we can see the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, receives Mrs. Victoria Ajayi, the Managing Director and CEO of TVC Communication, and her management team at Lagos House on a Monday, which happens to be yesterday as well. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, federal government inaugurates panel to probe NCOS. Prison deputy controller says his suspension was a social media suspension. Petrol subsidy will bankrupt Nigeria, Omokri warns, calls for understanding. Half-year UBA grows earnings by 40% to 1.37 trillion naira, declares interim dividend of 2 naira per share. Nigeria at 64, PDP, NLC, PANDEF, MBF, Atiku, Abakoba, Okori, others speak on way forward, lament missed opportunities. The big story, October 1st, IGP orders watertight security. Vows clamp down on miscreants. NSCDC deploys 3,500 personnel in FCT. NHRC warns against excessive use of force. Courts restrict protesters to MKO Abiola Stadium. 3 other venues in Ogun. Metropolitan Square in Kwara. Protesters say no going back. And we still have the Renewed Hope Agenda milestone, which has taken most of the paper. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Well, before we move further, Richard, I mean, in the midst of the celebration of Nigerian independence at 64, and then we're seeing quite a number of reactions, quite a number of comments coming from various people. We're seeing that of the NLC, we're seeing the former Vice President Atiku. We're also seeing a number of people, Middle Belt Forum and many others, giving their own, what they feel is the way forward. And then in comparison to what we are having, the Renew Hope agenda, the milestone, And I believe this is a question where Nigerians will ask, what is so hopeful or what is so renewed about the hope? Because in the midst of all of these things, I mean, quite a number of people are raising concerns.
Yes.
After the removal of fuel subsidy, it seems there was no any plans on how to keep Nigerians moving despite removal of it. Here we are also seeing an Omokere warning the fact that if fuel subsidy is being returned, Nigeria is going to be backdrop. As well, we are seeing the fact that it seems as if there is still subsidy somehow. Nigeria just cannot, place their finger what exactly is happening. And then looking at this whole agenda, 70,000 naira CNG buses, student loan and all of that, you want to ask the question, is this a right for Nigerians or is this more like a duty? Because we've had where things that we have our leaders they are supposed to do, they tend to put it like an achievement. And then you want to look at the fact that, okay, it's too early to judge the present administration, but let's look at time memorial till date. What do we have to show as a country for the past 64 years, ever since we've been independent? Because if you are independent, expected there are certain decisions, there are certain things you should be able to do on your own. But then when you look at it, it tends to be like, are we moving? We are not moving. Just like you said earlier on, we are moving, but it's not as if very slow. And then to some, Nigerians, they can say we're actually at one point. We can look at various things that are happening. We can look at our security. We can look at health. We can look at education. Because there is no better way to judge, the administration rather than looking at all of these sectors. It's by looking at the sector, we know whether or not we are moving forward or we're going backward as a nation.
Sele, this milestone, it's embarrassing that the federal government is using this milestone as an achievement or as a proof of them working. Are they good things? Yes, but they are fleeting. They are not concrete, Sele. Nigerians are due a minimum wage. So if you fail to, you're violating the rights of your citizens. You're not doing anybody a favor by implementing a new minimum wage. By virtue of inflation, the economy, even without the hardship, even without our inflation spiking high, even without the removal of fuel pump price, Nigerians, as of 2024, are due a new minimum wage review and implemented by virtue of our constitution, of how long it takes before. When you put it as an achievement, it looks like you brought something as a favor that is not supposed to, but you are giving Nigerians something that is not supposed to be their own. And this is the kind of government that I am tired of, where our basic needs, necessities, when made available to us, it looks like we're being done a great favor, and the federal government takes it upon themselves as an achievement. So we can talk about our foreign exchange reserves. We are supposed to be doing way better than this in terms of reserves. It is still low as compared. When you look at our reserves and our population, Sele, it is not good enough. We can talk about our GDP per capita and all of that. It might look like there's an increase, but we do know that the reserves suffered this year, 2024. We just happen to have it increase in a few months time because of inflows, remittances, and then the recent bonds that the federal government released. Now, without that, we won't be having our reserves increasing like this. It almost looks like the federal government deliberately towards the October 1st started doing certain things for them to be able to have milestone, because this bond that was released, we had $500 million bond that brought in $900 million into our reserve. This was a recent thing, the release of this bond, and that's why we're able to have this 37.7 billion increase alongside other remittances, diaspora remittances precisely, and some investment. Now, when we come to oil and gas, 3 new landmark presidential directives issued to unlock billions of dollars in new investment is not a milestone. It's not. It is to unlock. it has not yet
been
unlocked. So we do not know what potential it has, and even if it's going to achieve what the federal government expects. So like, what would have been more concrete than all of these fleeting things is, okay, subsidy removal gone. Now we have one refinery fully functional. And I'm not talking about Dangote refinery. I am talking about the Port Harcourt refinery. I am talking about the Warri refinery. I'm talking about the Kaduna refinery. And yesterday on this same paper, we saw the debt that NNPCL is in. And we saw the Port Harcourt refinery leading with about 1.97 trillion naira, and yet nothing to show for it. So when we are talking about the oil and gas sector, why are we not seeing more concrete things that will take the country to the next level? We're looking at an administration that is over a year plus. We can no longer sit down and say it's too early to criticize or to ask questions. It is not too early. We've gone a year of not paying subsidy by the federal government, whether technically, mechanically, or whatever is the term they want to use. We've gone over a year of not paying subsidy. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said subsidy gone and nothing has changed about it. Now, what is the next step of action in regarding petrol in the country? We want to see more solid things being put in place and taken care of. That is when we can sit down and say, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the Tinubu's administration. But then we have subsidy gone. Then what is the next plan for our oil and gas sector? These are the questions we want to know. What is your plan? Not the potential of what you want to do, but what is the plan that's supposed to have kick off alongside the petrol subsidy gone? These are some of the concrete things that I am looking forward as a milestone from the federal government, because now as a common man, you can be able to sit down and say, well, now we have Dangote refinery, we have the Port Harcourt refinery, then this and that problem can be cancelled out in a short period of time. Then we can say we are making headway regarding certain things happening in the country. But until then, these are all fleeting things, Sele. They are not permanent. You can't put in student loan. It doesn't give revenue to the government. As a matter of fact, this is more like a palliative. It's not to be, we are not trying to say, but you know what? There are students who have this loan and will die along. The debt is inevitable for everybody. You might not be able to return. A matter of fact, this is the government gambling when and this is no interest loan. So it's either you get back or you don't get back. So this program most especially takes away from the government. It is not as it is now as a country. We need more of things that will grow us than things taken out of us. But well, if the federal government sees a program that doesn't even look like it will be sustainable as a milestone, fine. But I am looking what will stand the test of time. Well, and so far, so good, we're not seeing that.
If you ask them.
Well, it seems that way. But then when you're not putting other things, you have ASO on the other side. So what if you're giving grants and loans, but then there are no people to teach and there are no facilities and all of that? It's still 2-0 as far as I'm concerned. You're losing at the end of the day. So I just hope that the federal government begins to implement things that I can see standing the test of time. Until then, these milestones are milestones, but they are fleeting, Celia, and I'm hoping for more concrete milestones.
Honestly, Richard,
yes.
honestly. Well, let's take a look at other papers. And on the Punch newspaper, we have alleged 27 trillion naira fraud ex-Taraba governor Ishaku remanded in custody. You can read detail of that in the paper. Nigeria at 64, we must reform or collapse. This is coming from President Tinubu, where we have the CSO vow to go on with the protest. And you permit me to read a little regarding what the president is saying about whether we will continue the way we are. Now, it's in that the president today stated that Nigeria must neither reform for progress and prosperity or continue with business as usual and risk collapse. He, however, said his administration, upon taking over the leadership of the country 16 months ago, decided to reform the political economy and defense architecture, given the critical juncture the country found itself. He lamented that Nigeria found itself in a precarious situation because of the missed opportunities and mistakes of the past, while calling on Nigerians not to allow the mistakes to follow the country into the future. Now, this is part of the broadcast the president made to actually mark Nigeria's 64 years of independence. So you can do well to continue to read more detail of what his speech was regarding the 64 years, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On New Telegraph, food inflation. World Bank's lists Nigeria amongst hardest hit nations, approves $1.57 billion for health and human capital. On Rivers local government poll, again court stops INEC from releasing voters' register. The first half of 2024, UBA records 1.37 trillion naira stellar earnings. You can find details on page 7. The big story, Tinubu to Nigerians at Independence Anniversary. I'm deeply aware of your struggles in these challenging times. We have writers under the story. You can find details on page 2. Hashtag Fearless October protest. Showdown looms as military dominates Eagle Square with 10 mounted trucks. Why Nigerians should list to protest and by NLC. Nigeria at 64, I feel like weeping, says Okiro. You can find details of his statement on page 36, 28, and 29. And that's all the news on New Telegraph.
Well, before we continue further with the paper review, quite a number of reactions regarding Nigeria at 64. We would love to also hear your own views. What do you feel about the celebration as well as, the president's speech on a day like this, where he's saying he is aware of the hardship Nigerians are going through, and we all have to endure together because soon we're going to reap the harvest of this hardship. Well, we hope that what the president is saying will come true. So we hope that you drop your comment, your views, and when we come back from the break, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. It's still the Dailies and a special edition on a day like this where we celebrate Nigeria at 64. And we have quite a number of stories on the paper, reaction regarding Nigeria at 64, where we're having the former vice president, we're having NLC, we are having a number of people, trying to say what they feel about it, where we are seeing IPOP stopping, the South for celebrating independence, and you wonder why. If they are part of Nigeria, we all are supposed to celebrate a day like this. So we'd love to hear your own views regarding that. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, we will continue the paper review, looking at Daily Independence newspaper. Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kekere Ekwu, warned against disobedience to court orders. You can read detail of that in the paper. The first half of 2024, UBA earnings up by 40% to 1.37 trillion naira, declares 2 naira interim dividend. More detail found in the paper. And we have a front page comment talking about 64 years of chasing inclusive golden fleece. You can read more detail of what this is all about. Still, Nigeria at 64, revive nationalism in defense of democracy. PDP tells citizens. With the rider, Nigeria on the brink of one-party dictatorship, coming from Atiku. Despite challenges, be hopeful, Jonathan urges Nigerians. More detail on page 30. October 1st protest, dialogue with protest leaders. CSO charged government with the rider urged security agents to desist from use of force. Learn to protest within limits of law, NLC president tells members. Rivers to get new people-owned structure October 5th, says Fubara. Tinubu reaffirms commitment to uphold the judiciary's independence. Rivers local government poll, court bars INEC from releasing voters' register to the Rivers State Electoral Commission. More detail found on page 28. Poor policies slow aviation sector growth in 64 years. A report coming from experts. Downside we have Omokiri calls for peace. One petrol subsidy will bankrupt Nigeria. We can see the president welcoming the new Chief Justice of Nigeria. And that's all on Daily Independence newspaper.
On the Metrics newspaper, NIBSS BVN enrollments reached 63.4 million in September 2024. Joshua receives 28-day suspension following knockout loss to Du Bois. Huge tax before Kekere Okun as CJN unveiled. Thus, to prioritize obedience of court orders, Tinubu pledges commitment to independent judiciary. Court bars INEC from releasing voters registered to Rivers LG election. Atiku urges National Assembly to consider 6-year presidential term. The big story: amid hardship, Nigeria celebrates 64th independence. Symbol of national pride, unity, now passes with faint enthusiasm. Statement from CUPP. Nigerians burdened by broken promises, exploitation, corruption, but don't give up. NLC is saying. IGP assures on watertight security for Nigerians amid protest scare. Sowore says no backing down on protests until demands are met. We must tackle challenges undermining our prosperity. Downplay issue dividing us. Downplay issues dividing us. Statement from the Senate leader. PDP Atiku lament urges Tinubu to listen to heartbeat of Nigerians. And that's all the news on the Metrics.
All right, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct newspaper. Federal government approves 122 billion naira investment in 6 indigenous firms for gas infrastructure development. Access Bank relaunches W initiative to drive financial inclusion empowerment in Zambia and Botswana. Data found on page 2. Tinubu swears in the Chief Justice of Nigeria, reiterates commitment to independence of judiciary. Ayeda Tiwa grant pardon to 117 convicts. Detailed on page 7. UBA posts 40% growth in earnings, declared 2 naira interim dividends. The big story in Nigeria at 64. Pressure mounts on Independence Day as Nigerians protest hardship twice in 2 months. We will not deterrain, so we're having Sowore vows as police deploy personnel. No procession rally will be allowed in Abuja, coming from the AIG. Atiku warns of democratic erosion, says Nigerians' progress threatened by lack of political inclusivity. Nigeria still a crawling giant at 64, report coming from the CUPP. And we have the picture story. One is showing the president welcoming the Chief Justice of Nigeria, and the other we are having the governor of Lagos State. You can do well to read more detail of what this story is and war is all about.
On Teen Trust, you can find facts about Nigeria independence on page 13. 13-year student wins Heirs Insurance 2024 SA Championship. Nigeria is 64 today. You can start reading that on the front page. We have lifestyle on page 7, page 5 for career, page 14 for well-being, and short stories on page 10. And that's all the news on Teen Trust newspaper.
Let's take a look at another paper, which happens to be the Blueprint newspaper. And on the Blueprint newspaper, we have World Bank approves $1.57 billion for Nigeria's health sector. 64th anniversary independence, where we have better days ahead for Nigerians, coming from the President Tinubu. Reversing petrol subsidy will make Nigeria go backdrop. UBA grows earning by 40% to 1.37 trillion naira, declares 2 naira interim dividend, with more details concerning that found on page 23. And even though we're looking at this whole thing, I'm looking at how much the World Bank have approved for Nigeria's health sector. And I hope that every dime goes into the health sector, because we know there is a need for a total revamping when it comes to our health sector, the welfare of our health practitioners, the structures there that, infrastructures and all of that that are needed. Talking about even having maybe health insurance for a number of people. We saw the number of people that are on it, and it's really, really low compared to the people that should be on it. So I look forward to seeing every dime of this money going, because there is a need for our health sector to be revamped as needed.
Oftentimes it feels like we can't feel the impact of certain funds that have been given to the country, because every day, there's no week that passes by without us seeing that World Health Organization, the United Nations, one international organization or another giving funds for targeted areas in the country. And we can say that the impact is not felt most of the time. Well, we are a very large country. However, there are certain things that we should be able to see the dividend for it. And I just hope that we do have an accountable administration. This is a new one. Let's hope to see that eventually, when such funds are being disbursed, we can feel the impact. And we know that there are a lot of underlying issues. We saw diversion of supplements. Exactly. I hope that this is not the case when it comes to fundings that goes to the health sector in this country, but that eventually we will start seeing the result, because over the years it almost feels like there's nothing that is being done regarding certain fundings in the country. But it is a good one, and we just hope to see the impact of certain help coming to Nigeria.
And we look forward to that. We still have the Renew Hope Agenda milestone. You can see that on the front page. For those who missed that on other papers, you can do well to grab the blueprint and read more detail of that. And that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Joshua drops 6 places in WA ranking, Ajaba 10th. Okoye apologizes to Udinese fans after Inter howlers. War of words. Ilechukwu Ogumodede throws jabs after NPFL clash. Chelsea plot £40 million Osimhen swoop. Gunners battle Parisians at Emirates. We have Rossoneri seek first win against Germans. United stick with Ten Hag. City to pay £70 million for Barella. You can find details on page 4. Reds unmoved by Salah Saudi links. The big story: Nigeria at 60, highs and lows of Nigerian sports in the last 365 days. Alisson listed as newer replacement. Griezmann quits France national team. Junior female yellow greens will shine in Malaysia. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Right, and that's how far we can go on this program this morning. It's really a beautiful day. So please do well. Stay safe. If you have to protest, please protest in a lawful manner. Do not get into trouble. And if you sense trouble, please leave that place and go home. Happy Independence again, and have a blessed day ahead.